Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro RPG. The end of another week, the end of another poll. We've got a very slim win for Tir Tairngire for Shadowrun. Now as usual, I'll have a look at that on the desktop in a wee second, and I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel related stuff and some other poll related stuff. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to talk about my Patreons, who this week I have been told no to choose their enemies carefully. Now these are absolutely great guys, and their contributions help to make all of this possible. So it's very much appreciated. I love them all. Now if you'd like to join them and help support the channel, and I sure wish you would, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to gain access to one of the other levels of patronage we've got, then there's a Patreon in the description down below. If you check it out, it would be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at Tir Tairngire. So, this is Tir Tairngire, which came out for Shadowrun by FASA in 1993. And is written by the always wonderful Nigel D. Findlay. Now, I've spoken about him at length before, because he was one of the best writers for Shadowrun, but sadly was taken from us at way too young an age, at the age of only 35 years. A couple of years after this book was written. Now, I know that there's a lot of fans of him out there as well, because I've spoken to you in the comments about it, and it's becoming a sad thing that this wonderful, wonderful writer, his stuff's becoming harder and harder to get, as many of the games he wrote for are now out of print. They're not even available for download through something like DrivethruRPG. So his body of work is getting lost in time. And he was a wonderful writer. So many good things in here. But anyway, this is a sourcebook on the Elven Nation of Tir Tairngire, which used to be the American state of Oregon. The history being roughly that as magic returned to the world and the Native American nations formed, this was part of them. But a bunch of elves who were welcomed into that particular Native American nations set things up and broke away to form an Elven Nation. And they have a very high metahuman population. So on the streets of this country, which I think only has a population of about 5 million people, but the percentage is higher of orcs and trolls than humans. So you'll see far more elves, they make up about 90%, and then we've got dwarves, orcs, trolls, all with a higher population than humans. They're far rarer. Because humans tend to not like the other metahuman races in their countries. There's things like the Humanist Podly Club, basically futuristic, anti-metahuman version of the KKK. Bothered about pointy ears rather than the colour of the skin. Now, let's have a look at the back cover. Tir Tairngire, a nation of the future built on traditions of the past, long shrouded in mystery, now one brave voice dares to speak the truth of the land of promise, Tir Tairngire. How did it come to be? Who holds its reins of power? And what does its future hold? The Tir Tairngire sourcebook reveals the Elven Nation for the first time in all its glory and danger. Journey there and beware. Tir Tairngire is a Shadowrun sourcebook that details the history, society, politics, and mystery of the Tir, the land of the elves in North America. And it's for Shadowrun 2nd edition, because 2nd edition came out in 92, I believe. I've got a bookmark in there. I'll throw that to the side. We can see that the desktop publishing is very much high standard, as FASA stuff was. It's very clear, well laid out, some nice artwork put in there. And we've got the typical introduction through Shadowland. So we can see the up-and-coming books. We've got the real-life compilations out. Tin and Og is en route. It's not available, so that was probably the next sourcebook to be released. And we've got the different sections within. We've got an introduction, talking about how this is the territory covered by Present-day Oregon. Similar to other Shadowrun sourcebooks, Tir Tairngire is formatted in an electronic document from that fictional world. So we've got lots of sections where there's information and then there's other people's comments. Now, given this is a book about a magical nation, we've got lots of comments from the Laughing Man, who is Harlequin from the adventure, and the Big D, who is Dunkelson, who would later become President of the United Canadian American States, Dunkelson the Dragon. So, first up, we've got first impressions. So, 5 million population, 1% human, 85% elf, 7% dwarf, 5% orc, troll population's negligible, Other, so vampires, shapeshifters, etc., is 2%. The average income, and some information added by Shadowrunners. How to get into it, what the climate's like, getting in by plane, by road, by sea. What happens on arrival, what the currency is, getting around, the laws and law enforcement, what substances are illegal and addictive, how they handle that, how emergencies, medical services, and then the largest city, Portland, which is the gateway into the Tir as well. We've got the geography of it. So, mentioning different places, we've got Crater Lake. How it came to be. So, as things happened, as the American nations broke away after the Great Ghost Dance, after they'd been badly treated in re-education camps, Tir Tairngire belonged to the Shrouded Council. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. The Confederation of the Maka, the Salish, and the Cascade Crow, and others. How immigration happened, the promise, and then as it broke away. And one of the things it introduces is the fact that one of the leaders of the Tir is Aaron the Scribe, and how he looks like one of the Native Americans that set up the nation before it, but now he has a slightly different appearance. It also kind of rubbishes that idea. The California War, fledgling nation, and then we've got some colour plates. The Tir Matrix, a blend of high-tech and ancient design. Well, that looks really ancient design now. It's definitely 90s. Rite of passage brings an elf into manhood. Along the border, the patrol prepares for a night of fireworks. Aaron the Scribe. Connection of spirit and form, Tir elves undergo the rite of progression. And travel tip, when in Portland, take a cab. Anyway, it continues with different areas, and then we've got politics. Now, one of the things I do like in here is it's introducing the idea of this nation mainly being controlled by the ancient elves, the people who have survived since the Age of Earthdawn, because this sourcebook really heavily lays on the links between Earthdawn and Shadowrun, especially within this nation. This is a peek into the past where these immortal elves, who are thousands upon thousands of years old, and a dragon, because there's a dragon on their ruling council, are controlling this country and trying to bring back the ways of the past in a modern world. So we've got the Council of Princes. We've got Enter the Dragon. Lothwar, the great dragon, became one of the members of the Council of Princes. The High Prince and the Council, so going over how the country is ruled. Paladins, the best warriors of the Tir. The Star Chamber. Internal affairs, including rights versus privileges. What's considered treason. Challenging the government, foreign relations. Then we've got political profiles. Lou Shorehand, who is the High Prince. Ithne Oak Forest. Sean Laverty. Aaron the Scribe. Jenna Nefara. And it makes a point here that somebody saw a vision of a painting of her where thorns were sticking out through her skin. So making out that she's one of the blood elves from Earthdawn. And Harlequin, the Laughing Man, yes, our dear sweet Blood Queen. Now there's a tale to be told. Then tell it. In time. We've got tier societies, so going on about race, in a country where elves are the majority. Discrimination against other elves. Against other races, sorry. The majority. The right of pronouncement, the right of passage. So as they join this culture. Social rank. So we've got the gentry, we've got chivalry, the committal rank, the ducal rank, royal life, how you inherit rank, right of progression, and bureaucratic testing, physical testing, and the results of that. Now, this whole thing about elves having their own nation and controlling everything, I had problems with at the time, but I've come to actually like it. Because much like you might consider our current world to be controlled by men, part of the patriarchy, as people call it. You know, most major corporations, most governments are controlled by men. But as a man myself, I'm not part of that. I'm not consulted when the patriarchy wants to get together and rule the world. They don't ask my opinion at all. And that's the way I came to the conclusion with elves. While there are some elves which control everything, all the other elves are just ordinary people. So if you're playing a Shadowrunner elf, you don't have to be in on this big conspiracy. You are just an ordinary person and you aren't consulted either. Anyway, what have we got here? High Prince Fiat, certification testing, the language. The native language is Spirithiel. We've got a Spirithiel glossary, so different words used in it. Magic use pervades Tir Tairngire at a higher level than virtually any other North American nation. They phrase that very carefully because, of course, the South American countries with their blood magic do have a lot of magic. Irish connections, Tir Tairngire and Tir Nanog. We've got standard information, the economy, so how much things will cost. Some things are more expensive, some things are cheaper. Corporate presence, because the tier has a specific rule that multinational corporations have very limited control. So they tend to set up completely owned sub-companies, which are Tir Tairngire corporations, but controlled from outside. Multinationals. I'm skipping a page here. So going through different ones, Knight Errant, Ares Macronic Technology. We've got telecommunications, so the Matrix, and all the things on there. Laws, including immigration, so whether you're entering it by personal invitation of a prince, where you've got a work visa, whether you've got a student visa, because they have some fantastic universities, visitors visas, leaving the country, travel, immigration, capital conservation, so keeping their money within the country so you don't take lots of money out of it. We've got criminal law, so weapons, fines and punishment, and how all that's dealt with. Civil law, ancient traditions. We've got organised crime. The peace force, so the law enforcement people. Basically the military and police. So we've got military divisions, border patrols, constabulary, Netwatch to protect their matrix. And then we're going down on some of the major cities. So we've got Portland with a population of 2 million. So a large percentage of the country's population, so some 40%, live in just one city. And we go through the different sections. So the Portland Wall, how it's secured from people entering it and leaving it. The precincts, we've got a map of it here, how to get around just ordinary transit. Places of interest, so different hotels, inns, meeting places, places that Shadowrunners might go, so nightclubs, government buildings they might break into to get information. Hospitals, a civic stadium. We've got Royal Hill for the richest area, and a diagram of the Royal Palace, the different buildings within that area. Then we've got Salem, which is a much smaller, only 95,000 people stay there, but we've got the different sections, so restaurants and bars, other locations, just going through a nice map of Salem there, medical facilities, casinos, museums. Eugene, 110,000, and going through that, we've got the map of Santa Clara, Eugene and Springfield, places of interest like the Oakway Lodge, the Fireplace Lounge, the Civil Council building, and then we've got an open conference where people discuss all things about the tier themselves. And it kind of gets kicked off a few times because we get arguments between people who hate the elves, people who show overly respect to the elves. We've got arguments between Dunkelson and Harlequin, which end up the entire chat crashes at one point. Big D has joined the conversation. Intrusion alert, system failure, as they crash the entire conversation. We've got a few maps of Tir Tairngire itself, with Portland on the border. The Selishid Council, again, not sure how I'm pronouncing that. And then we've got an advert for Shadowrun Wear from Equine. I wish I'd bought some of this at the time, because I do love that Shadowrun logo. The horned skull with the scroll behind it with digital information running through it. I would have loved to have had a sweatshirt with a big logo on the back. But alas, I never bought it. Oh well. And that's Tir Tairngire. It's a fantastic book. I really like the way it's laid out. There's so much information in there. It's been criticised since because it does create this very Earthdawn connected nation. It's way too powerful. It's difficult for Shadowrunners to get in. But that's kind of its purpose. We've got lots of other places that Shadowrunners can get in and out, which are easy meat. This is supposed to be much more difficult, much more thought out and long term. The elves have been around, or the elves who are controlling it have been around for thousands of years. They know how to secure a nation, and they've got the power and influence to make sure it is secured. So Shadowrunners just being able to slip over the border doesn't make much sense. Now, I've seen a comment from the person who wrote the Guide to North America, which came out much later than this, and he wrote the Tir Tairngire section, and was fairly insulting of this book. But to hell with him, I love it. There's some great stuff in here. Nigel D. Findlay, always worth the cover price. And it's hooking it into Earthdawn, part of the thing I really loved with Shadowrun, in building it into a bigger world, rather than it just being cyberpunk with metahumans in it. So that was Tir Tairngire, and that won the poll this week with some 38% of the vote, only narrowly ahead in this all Shadowrun poll of the new Seattle sourcebook, which came on 34%. Now obviously that occupies most of the percentage points, so everything else is quite a bit distant behind, with Target UCAS coming in on 11%, Threats 2 on 10%, which surprised me because we'd covered the Threat sourcebook before, and it went down particularly well, so I thought it might do better, but alas, not this time. And in final position was Augmentation with only 8%. Now that's a sourcebook from 2007 from Catalyst. So it seems clear that you guys are definitely more interested in the FASA area stuff, the older books, than the newer ones. Now, I do have some 4th and 5th edition stuff to cover at some point, but it's a clear message to me that you want me to keep covering the old FASA classic 1st and 2nd edition stuff, which I'm more than happy to do, because I've got loads of it left to cover. Now, I also like to mention that in the next Retro RPG poll, in a week's time, my time, I will be putting in a lot of suggestions, because on the last video, where it was a suggestion from a viewer based on 13th Age, I did ask for your suggestions of other games I should cover, and you absolutely cascaded tons and tons of suggestions at me, so the next poll will probably be all suggestions from viewers. Some absolute great stuff in there, and some stuff I really want to look at as well, but that's going to be in a week's time, so we'll talk about it then. At the moment, we're going on to a Retro Adventures poll. And some of these are older, some of these are newer. They've been in polls before, some of them haven't. So, first up, we've got Reception of Time for Call of Cthulhu. Now, this is a Call of Cthulhu Now module set in the 1990s. I don't actually know that much more about it. I bought it when it came out. I remember reading it at the time, but I can't remember anything that really happens in it. And next up, we've got Palace of the Silver Princess for Dungeons & Dragons, which came out in 1981. So this is quite an old adventure, but it's kind of carrying on. I've covered Keep at the Borderlands, In Search of the Unknown, and this was the next in the series, so it'll be interesting to have a look at that as well. We've got The Last War Hulk for Alternative, which was also by TSR, but this time in 1998. So just before they were taken over by Wizards of the Coast. This is one of the last TSR releases ever done, compared to one of the early ones. We've got Out in the Black for the Serenity role-playing game from 2006. Now, Serenity's a fascinating game, and Margaret Weiss Productions, headed up by an absolutely revolutionary writer, so it'll be interesting to see what they did with Serenity. I did love the Firefly series and the Serenity movie. So I want to see more. Let's see if you do. And finally, we've got the Outcasts for the Star Trek role-playing game by FASA in 1985. Now, the FASA adventures and sourcebooks were absolute classic. It's in a time before the movies, before Next Generation, before we had a view on what the Star Trek universe was like from the television producer's side of things. And FASA ran with the ball and created their own universe with the Triangle, with competition between the Klingons, the Romulans, the Federation. Some absolutely great stuff, which in many ways fits the Star Trek universe of the television series better than later stuff. Absolutely fantastic stuff. It'd be a joy to cover yet another adventure, because I've covered a couple of the adventures in the past. What else has been going on? Well, nothing much on the channel. It's been fairly quiet. I've been pretty busy. But over on rpggamer.org, I'm now working my way through the Tales of the Empire series, doing reviews and stats each day. I should be getting through those fairly soon. I'll have a few of the comics I'm covering, the Darth Vader and the High Republic comic to catch up with. And then I'm going to be going on to the Knights of the Old Republic comic book series, which came out in around 2010, 2012, based on the video games. And they're very different from the later Old Republic stuff, because they are based on these video games, which are no longer really considered canon, even though they were so well received at the time. But we shall come on to that in the fullness of time. But anyway, I've been wittering on for quite long enough, so thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.